Hi, this is Matthew Holt, founder and publisher of the healthcare blog at Boltibill on Twitter. And you have reached THCB Gang. It's episode 59, June 24th, 2021. And I have a great guest lineup today. Kim Bellard is here with us, regular writer on THCB, former managed care executive at Kim Bellard. Ian Morrison, my former boss, health futurist at Second Curve from Menlo Park, California, is joining us. My colleague on Health in 2.0 and also at our new upcoming conference, Policies, Techies, VCs, What's Next for Healthcare, Jessica DaMassa, the interviewing queen at WTF Health, is here with us. Michael Millenson, patient safety expert from Health Quality Advisors in Chicago, is here. And our guest is Justin Norden, who is as you'll find out pretty quickly, a polymath of every type, and these days an MD at GSR Ventures. And we'll get into finding a bit more about Justin as this progresses. Now, normally at this stage, you would be hearing from me going around the group, asking them all about what it is that they saw the last week or two that they're really interested in. And unfortunately, I managed to hit the wrong button and kill that part of the recording. So we're just going to go straight ahead and join it with me introducing Justin. But before I do that, it's worth noting that Ian and Jessica both raised the issue of AI. There was a lot of discussion around this week about Epic's sepsis module and the impacts that had for malpractice and other issues. And then Justin raised the issue, wanted to, in his little intro, raise the issue of the IPOs that were just happening, and to get Doximity IPO'd, Bright Health IPO'd, Talkspace IPO'd yesterday, and it was announced that Pear is going to SPAC out, the digital therapeutics companies. That there's a lot of conversation you can expect about that. So that's where we end this little introduction. And I go straight into my introduction of Justin. Let's introduce our guest properly. So Justin is an MD, but also got a far too many degrees, degree in computer science. He spent some time at Cambridge, which used to be a low-class university, but obviously improved a huge amount between the time they let me in and the time they let him in. And on the side, has done a couple of things. Most recently, while he was becoming a venture capitalist, also founded an AI company. We want to talk to you a bit about Justin and what happened there, which I think just Waymo just bought, right? The self-driving car people. So
that's correct.
You're going to tell us when the self-driving cars are going to be ready to pick me up and drive me to Tahoe so I can have a beer or two on the way rather than having to drive myself. And most importantly and most impressively is a professional ultimate frisbee player. You lot may not know there was such a thing as a professional frisbee player, but there really is, and he is one. So I don't know where we start with you, but I think we should start with the ultimate frisbee. If you're a professional sportsman, all the folks I see playing soccer and whatever at the European Championships, they don't need to have side jobs as VCs. Although one in England's got a side job as like running the country at the moment. But how did you get into becoming a professional ultimate frisbee player?
So first, you start off as a big nerd who chooses to play ultimate frisbee for their main sport. That's step one. But then, while you're able to play a niche sport, sadly, ultimate frisbee does not pay any of the bills. Maybe a little bit of beer money here and there, but they fly us around, and we're getting a few hundred fans in the stadiums, which is exciting for a small sport.
Are you in season right now?
Technically, yes. Last season was stopped, but people are able to play. Again, there's enough skill where I don't have to train as much as I used to back in the day. Actually played out Matt out for our Cambridge team. It was not a blue sport, unfortunately. So no letter there.
Half blue? I got a half blue for playing another. I played lacrosse at Cambridge, which got me. It was another American sport, and there weren't really many people playing it, so I got a half blue for that. Bit of a fail.
Sadly, no.
Your background takes new significance. Your background takes new significance. And I'm wondering, is that an ultimate frisbee behind you?
No, that's the Stanford dish.
Yeah, close enough.
In the hike, when you're out here around, happy to take you up there.
All right. So and by the way, but there is a professional league with franchises and stuff. It's like
there is.
what's your team? Shout out your team.
This team is the Spiders. So we're out in Oakland now. We were actually in San Jose and moved up to Oakland this year. So excited to be a part of it.
Awesome.
Fantastic. All right, well, let's move on to the more dreary stuff. Tell us a bit about your background in the AI company. How did you manage to both start an AI company and start as a VC at the same time? Did one or the other say you weren't paying us enough attention? And just tell us a bit about the relevance of that for your work as a doctor in healthcare.
Sure. So actually, and I'm curious to hear Michael's take on this as we think about quality and safety. But I guess you're going back to the beginning. I started out as a computer scientist, but the plan was always to be a physician. The plan was always to go into medicine, always treat patients. Coming from a family in medicine, growing up in Seattle, but I always had this interest of how do you combine technology and medicine. So starting out first as a computer scientist, going through medical training, you have this constant question of, no way is this how we're solving things. There's no way that we don't have better solutions for this. Why are we faxing data? Why aren't we using simple algorithms to improve quality in what we're doing? And so I kept banging my head against those things. A few clinical detours across the training path, we ended up launching the Stanford Center for Digital Health, where we're doing some of the first telemedicine visits out of Epic. Sadly, then it was kind of more of a interesting thing we could do for our own ACO population. But before the heyday of this past year, where telemedicine had its moment, ended up going to Apple for a little bit on the healthcare team, getting to see and launch some of the products there. But then I ended up coming back. Was always interested in entrepreneurship and starting a company. And so I was actually started this company, Trustworthy AI, where how could we quantify the risk of algorithms? And so perfect discussion to talk about. For what we're doing in healthcare here, we had some papers quantifying the risk of an artificial pancreas algorithm. How do you see where it's going to fail, where it might harm a patient, especially when this is working on its own? But turns out there's actually much more interest in the methods and things we were doing in the autonomous vehicle space, right? Autonomous vehicles, have captured, the hearts and minds of many hey, is it possible? How can we drive someone? How can we truly automate what we're doing and take the driver out of the equation? I'll try not to get myself in trouble immediately, but Waymo was interested enough in the work we're doing, and so recently acquired our technology and team. My personal passion, obviously, is much more interested in fixing healthcare and how can we apply technology to healthcare to truly scale the work that we're doing. But I think algorithmic safety and what we're going to do is, I would say actually probably behind where it is currently in the autonomous vehicle space. And so I think we can look to some of those, regulations and rules that are coming out there and think about how that's going to apply in the healthcare space going forward as we continue to increase automation.
So we have to ask you the big question: when am I going to be able to get in the car and just have it drive me to Tahoe without me having to do anything about it? And what implications does that have for sepsis?
I would not hold your breath. Is the quick version. I'll say. I think there's still a lot of room, but at the same time, right, you do have algorithms deploying driving people today, right? Companies like Tesla, right, are using autopilot. It is not fully autonomous, but it is driving people around. And I think you can see companies like Plus, actually a company in our portfolio that is in the autonomous trucking space that is driving, is deploying a level 2 system with trucks where there is a human still in the loop. You can't fully drink a beer and relax on your way to Tahoe, but they are really saving time and energy and efficiency with these solutions. And actually my hope, and actually writing an article at the moment with one of our advisors, Dr. Nirav Shah, on what we could do in healthcare that looks a little bit more like deploying autonomous systems slowly, keeping doctors in the loop, keeping other people in the loop, because I think not only can we deploy these things faster, which we desperately need, but also we really have the potential to keep that physician interaction with the patient, build trust, and actually add value to an algorithm rather than kind of removing it completely.
Can I jump in for a moment,
Yeah,
Justin?
please dive in.
So I'm actually just finishing a column for my Forbes blog today about AI and humans and trust based on a Mayo presentation talking about the fact they had this great algorithm for detecting low ejection fraction. They did it with the primary care physicians at Mayo, and it was great. But the doctors, is this really smarter than I am? Is this going to mess up the doctor-patient relationship? How do I explain to my patients that it's not the Terminator running things? And there was a really good piece in NPJ Nature by some Stanford doctors talking, which you may know them, talking about the need for delivery and implementation science in AI. Now, the book that I wrote back in 1997 was called Demanding Medical Excellence, Doctors and Accountability in the Information Age. And I was so absurdly optimistic that I talked about the fact that laptops would be more important than lab coats. And you know, the adoption of IT, just, you know, the first predictive analytics computer in a big, you know, wasn't even a mainframe, I think it was just a big desktop that I found was 1954. 1959 they were doing it, right? So what you were talking about, I think, was absolutely key, is addressing the culture by having the doctors and patients and the technology work together. Because I think one thing we've proven over the last few years, and you would know this better than anyone, is that doctor culture is semi-impermeable to change, right? So all the people who said, you know, the baby boomers will change it. That's what they said when Dr. Spock was new, right? The millennials will change it. Women will change it. Nobody will change it. You have to kind of move it along with meeting it where it is and moving people along. So I think what you're talking about taking the technology and doing it in a way that helps the culture feel comfortable with it is exactly what we need, because unlike cars, healthcare will never have any driver. So we have to move it along.
So let me go back to what Ian raised, which is the issue around, and I haven't looked at this as closely as some of those, but this issue around this EPIC module around the sepsis and how old, you know, one of you want to tell this from me, but how old the calculation, the algorithm is, how well it works, and how it's been accepted, and you know, and what the response has been to that, and what do you think that does to the concept of you know, Ian's? Why am I talking? Ian, you asked the question. What do you think this does to the concept of, you know, algorithms for malpractice and care and all the rest of it? I'm expecting Ian, Michael, and Justin to dive in here.
Oh, well, I mean, you've given me enough for my homework, I'll tell you, but that's all I really needed. I just
surely you needed someone to answer
sound bites and I'm my way to the races. But no, I think, look, and I'm no Luddite in this. I mean, I think I've always believed that AI is hamburger helper for doctors, right? It's a way to make a scarce resource go further. So, you know, I'm a big fan. I do think, given people like Babylon and others who have, you know, made some pretty splashy plays buying real physical assets, and if they have a secret sauce that has something to do with chatbot enabled, you know, front ends, that there could be a liability issue lurking here that is fairly substantial. And I just worry a little bit that the technology may be ahead of the malpractice regimen and so forth. But you know, you guys are right in the middle of this, so I defer to you in terms of where we end up. I think the key is to be having conversations with the people who bear the risk, right? Which are the carriers, and that's why it's always interesting to me that Babylon had one of the big reinsurers as one of their backers.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that the you know, I want to come back to you, Justin and Michael, about this, but before we leave, but for the particular instance around, you know, EPIC, that's the EPIC sepsis model. That's a very much in hospital, sort of contained in a box. There have been a bunch of you know, clinical decision support systems already in that world. Theoretically, these are getting smarter and better with AI. But you can kind of see how that works. When you start moving out to the wider world, the real driverless, you know, that's maybe like the driverless truck that we've got, that you talked about. When we look to the wider world, and you talk about, you know, triage on the front end. There's you know, the company in psychology called Robot, which had a write-up in the New York Times. Not a great write-up, by the way, but you know, is one of those, is one of the companies. And then there's a company called Lark. You mentioned Babylon, Ian, and a bunch of the chatbots, which are doing triage and doing steering and navigation. I mean, we're clearly, if we're going to scale some of this stuff, and we haven't even got into the stuff that goes direct to patients, like some of these mental health pieces, we're going to be expecting this to scale dramatically. We haven't started talking about payer yet, but we probably should pretty soon. We're going to be expecting this to scale dramatically. But I mean, Justin, going back to am I right to draw that contrast between kind of clinical decision support that's a bit smarter than we've had before in the hospital versus the whole wide world of, the driverless car, advocate, chatbot, front door for health tech? Is that a good distinction, or is this all sort of much more of a blancmange time than I would lay out?
I think that's a fair distinction. And we've had clinical decision support, right, going back to these algorithms for years within Epic, and they've been, trivial from an algorithmic perspective, right? If a value is above, a certain amount, heart rate, et cetera, lactate, then, move in this direction. But I think what you're talking about is there's now, I would even say it's less, in hospital, out of hospital, there's, direct to consumer offerings now that are triaging patient with a doctor or a provider never in the loop, right? How can we triage someone out from something or in from something? And this has always been an issue. We've tried to solve it on the phone. If you're having chest pain, go to the ED now, right? We've all kind of seen those alerts before. But then it's a little more nuanced. How do we do that in the depression space? How do we screen someone and make sure, are they having suicidal thoughts? Is this not the right candidate for an app? And so I think what is starting to be seen, right? And even, Pear starting to do this a little bit is, okay, we're going to have some of our own provider groups that will do the initial prescribing, that will do this initial screening. And so, we're still going to get the scale on the back end, because rather than having to take care of a patient, for every CBT-based session, we just have to do one thing at the initial, and then there are certain flags in between. But I think, the other companies like Babylon that are doing pure triage, from a law perspective, I think, who knows? I think there are going to be cases that go sideways, and the field is really behind catching up where the companies are today.
Yeah, I want to build on what Justin did. I actually did a research paper with some colleagues where we looked at the evidence for direct-to-consumer diagnostic apps. And then I wrote about that for the conversation. And the problem is that the FDA essentially doesn't regulate them. As long as you kind of put on there, this is not for medical purposes, as if trying to find out whether you have skin cancer is an entertainment for Saturday night. So this is not for medical purposes. So that's their kind of disclaimer on direct-to-consumer. And Babylon has been controversial, as Justin, from some of the British docs in particular, have looked at some of the things they've done. And I think what Justin put his finger on is exactly it, is you're going to have the kind of the combination with the clinical people using it as a front end, back end kind of thing, as opposed to on its own. What you're talking about in hospital use, I think you should listen carefully to what Justin talked about clinical decision support, right? Because there's a difference between an algorithm that makes a recommendation and something that just does something, right? And part of what the mental health and some of the other apps do, because they're scared of malpractice, is they sort of default. And I just recently wrote something about this for Stat News. I mean, they default to sort of go see your doctor, so they're not liable for anything, right? Which takes away a lot of their usefulness. Go to the emergency room, don't bother us. Call your lawyer. And so with the clinical decision support in the hospital, it's going to be a different kind of issue because that is involving professionals. I just want to add one quick thing about the Epic app. Epic has a sepsis. One of our other regular guests on this webcast, Raj Agarwal, from Late of Jefferson, a physician, talked about a sepsis app that they built in conjunction with In Touch Health. I consult to a company, Health Catalyst, that has a sepsis app. Duke built one, and you know what their malpractice risk was? They sent medical anthropologists 2 years later, only because they were a research institution, and they found out that the way the system, the platform, the AI platform was built, nurses had to show this placard to doctors saying, look, the AI system says that this patient's at risk. And it was nurses talking to doctors they didn't know, stressing out the nurses and making the doctors, didn't know the nurses either, all defensive and angry about what's this platform telling me about my patient. So there's a lot of human technology interaction stuff that a lot of the tech people don't think of, and that poses the risk. Because let's say you install this and it works great, it identifies everybody, you'll never know that it's blowing up your processes on the other end because the nurses are too scared to complain or whatever. And so I think that as AI becomes mainstream, a lot of issues that have not surfaced because we're too busy watching 15-minute dog and pony shows in hotel rooms are going to surface in the real world. I mean, that's kind of how I see it, Justin, and Kim, you may have other issues.
Well,
Yeah, Kim, and then I want to jump in and try and link this back to Per, but Kim, dive in.
one perspective that I think is amusing yet informative. I can't remember who said it a few months ago, that they're complaining about the black boxes in AI and healthcare. They said, well, it's no different than what we have now. The doctor is the black box. I mean, he might tell you why he made a decision, but you don't really know. At the end of the day, you don't really know why either one of them makes that decision. All you can figure out is whether that decision or recommendation is a reasonable seeming one or not, but you don't really know how it got there.
Well, we do have to think about a couple of things, right? So one is regulation. So the FDA has got this regulation. There are some of the first digital apps that went there were doing this where it was direct to consumer, changing the decision on behalf of the consumer. So WellDoc said, okay, you need to take more insulin or take less, eat more food or whatever it was, because we've got a measurement from you. We want to adjust it and not put that through a coach. So I get that. That's changing things. There's another group of these digital therapeutics, which are, I can't remember the name of the company, one of them which is trying to deal with Parkinson's. It's not charging 50 grand for a drug, doesn't work yet, but it's kind of flash lights in people's eyes or something like that, and do things which are kind of trying to directly change the way the brain works, effectively be a digital version of a molecule. And that needs some level of regulation. But then a lot of what folks like Pear and others are doing, as far as I can tell, and some of them have gone down this we need to be a digital prescription route, and some are going down we need to work with the health system and sell direct to employers and sell direct to consumer route and not get regulated by the FDA. But a lot of that, and I love all of your comments on this, a lot of that seems to be taking essentially what was done in a book or a manual. Wasn't done very well, but we will give you this course to go follow after you've left the doctor's office to figure out how to manage your stress. My daughter had one of these. We'll give you this manual, and if you're in the red, breathe deeply and calm down. A lot of the stuff you're seeing in mental health, but also I'm sure for addiction and probably schizophrenia, some of the other stuff, looks more like that, but we now put it in a fancy phone, right, and with a fancy app around it. I'm not sure how much of that is stuff that the FDA should be regulating, but clearly, Pear particularly, has gone that part of saying we will get this regulated by the FDA, and our business model is to get it regulated by the FDA, and they get it prescribed by doctors, and then get payers to pay for it like it's a drug. And I always keep saying this, my hope for digital health is that we spread it like software at the cost of software, not that we spread software at the cost of drugs, because drugs are too damn expensive. So that's my concern about this. I mean, Justin, do you think that's a fair description, or have I been too pejorative about what some of these people are trying to do in terms of getting the FDA to regulate their digital therapeutics? And we can talk about
before Justin answers, you forgot, Matthew, you forgot the use of sensors. I mean, that's kind of an important thing also in there. So go ahead, Justin.
So I think you're right. I think it started out, right, how can we, which is super important. You make it sound trivial, but we're used to discharging a patient from the hospital with this pile of papers and saying good luck, where it's not explained, almost no one follows it. Even with drugs, right, people are missing doses all the time. And so while it's true, the first step was just digitizing those simple protocols, I think the potential is so much greater. And that's why I'm really excited about this space. And the reason is, one, you can have actual feedback from, is someone actually engaging with the app, doing the exercises, getting better? One, that feedback can go back to the system and can go back to a real person who can intervene. Now, not every protocol has that, but that's possible. And the patient can actually see results, show how they're getting better in real time, which many drugs by themselves don't even have. And so, yes, I think the first step of digital therapeutics, and Pear has done, I think, a fantastic job educating the entire market. Yes, we can question, 4 million in estimated 2021 revenues, whether that justifies a $1.6 billion valuation. But I do think the potential for where these things are going to go is amazing. And the benefit is we're going to be able to track this, right? So many drugs, and we can talk about, right, the Alzheimer's drugs that came out, are people actually getting better? What is happening? There's so little data that comes back, even though the FDA and government is trying to mandate that this happens, especially with expensive drugs. With digital therapeutics, we're going to be doing that the whole time. Now, I don't think they'll come out at the price points maybe that Pear has hoped for. Maybe they're not going to get, the full, they're not going to charge $50,000 for their insomnia treatment. And there's some payers already pushing back on the HUR data, saying that it's not justified. But does it come somewhere in between, a wellness app solution, that's free or a few dollars, and a prescription drug? I think so. And I think there's huge potential going forward.
Do you think there's a distinction? So back to, I've now got, instead of the sheets of paper or whatever, or the thing I've given you in the instructions in Good Luck, I've now given you a program that you can fit into, which I think is part of the benefit of digital health. I mean, I've talked before, my daughter is going through the Brightline process at the moment, and they are steadily putting into place the sort of the program that the parents should do, and the sort of tracking piece all around, her care, rather than just seeing a counselor once a month and getting a pill every day, which, and then having to figure it out. So I love the concept of doing that. And I'm not sure I'm struggling with calling that digital therapeutics, because it seems to me that's an overall program that we could have done, and we didn't know how to do without the absence of technology, versus the ones which are directly trying to change, I forget the name of the company, I wish I knew it, who's flashing the lights in your eyes to try to deal with Alzheimer's. But, you can talk about WellDoc actually changing, saying you will take 3 doses of insulin, not 2 doses of insulin, because of what our algorithm says. Is that a false distinction, or is everybody kind of in the same bucket here?
No, I think that distinction is correct, right? Are you calling kind of Omada or like Livongo a digital therapeutic, right? And they're a targeted program, right? Delivering protocols we knew better with some digital components, but then also a lot of people coaching, just like there, as you mentioned with Brightline. In contrast, companies like Pear or companies like Limbix or Applied VR are truly delivering a digital product. And now it's not going to be for every patient, but let's call it lower risk, adolescent depression patients. They can just go through this online program kind of separately from the traditional healthcare system. Granted, we do want some bounds and some evidence to show that this is actually going to work if we're going to be, as physicians, prescribing this to patients. And that's what I think the field of prescription digital therapeutics allows. So at least in my mind, those two are separate things.
Can you say a bit more about Applied VR? Because I know you guys have funded that, and many people don't know what it does. But that I was going about the Parkinson's, the Alzheimer's one, I can't remember. But that's an exact example, right? That is trying to do something that a drug would normally have done. So just explain what it is and how it works.
Sure. So Applied VR, so actually now they have breakthrough designation for chronic low back pain and fibromyalgia, delivering CBT-based VR therapies where people are going through a multi-week program. And so as people are going through, people are actually seeing their pain reduction scores drops, learning coping techniques, and doing so in a very immersive setting where you're really controlling all the senses and getting people to focus, right? Breathing techniques otherwise that really allow them to manage their pain and their symptoms when there are no treatments available on the market that can handle this well. And so something like that, right, it's still, using a lot of, we could call it, the old protocols that we might have given someone, in paper, but it's really completely changing the modality of how we're engaging a patient. And they're seeing that in their trial data from getting patient reductions in pain, symptoms, and overall compliance, actually being willing to finish the program and use the product. Just like we know, whether it's traditional healthcare or digital health, actually getting someone through the program and to take whatever regimen it may be is a huge part of the battle. And that's, I think, the potential of what these digital therapeutics can do.
So in that case, they're putting on the headset, and they're doing that for half an hour or whatever a day, and they're doing some period of time. I mean, they're measuring. I guess they're measuring reduction in pain and scores the same way that you would measure them if you were taking an opiate or something, I'm sure. So it's equivalent, and presumably a lot fewer side effects. But I assume at some point in the trials they're checking on side effects. I don't know what kind of side effects you might have from that kind of intervention, but side effects. But also, has there been I don't know if this is the case. They've been doing this sort of checks. I know that Keeley has done some of this for some of their games, where they've actually done like brain MRIs to see if the thing is lighting up at the same way that it would if a drug impacted it. Is that same sort of thing going on for Applied VR?
Absolutely tracking side effects. I mean, they're going through all the same clinical trial protocols and have to report the data in the same way. But absolutely, if you compare it to taking, opiates with the slew of side effects, right now we have something that, yes, VR is not for everyone. Some people may get a little bit dizzy, may not really respond to the treatment. But for most, it is extremely, extremely safe. As for the MRIs, I'm not sure. They probably have done some studies. I don't know if Applied VR has run those studies, but people have certainly looked at, how the brain is responding in VR.
So I think that this is, to me, this is a fascinating area. Going back to the group, Ian, you raised this in the context of sort of malpractice and how this is going to change that. And the lawyers and the regulators will always come a bit later. But Michael, you raised the whole issue of, how are clinicians going to use this and how how is the augmented intelligence or the artificial intelligence going to help the clinicians? But I'd love to come back to you, Kim, because you tend to have a good sort of global view of these things. Is how much and how, we can all get excited about this stuff, and of course Justin doesn't have to get it right; he just has to make sure that the company can back out for 1.5 million in 2 years. But how much do you think is going to impact, in the foreseeable future on the patient and for the clinician experience? I'd love to get that conversation going a bit. I'll start with you, Kim, but anybody else can weigh in.
Well, thanks for the easy question. I appreciate that, gosh. Something you touched on sort of bothers me. Like the more we medicalize this stuff and price it like medical devices and medical prescriptions, are going to make it less available for people. I mean, somehow you need to have it more like, things that people would use in their everyday lives and incorporate into their everyday life, not something that's imposed upon them by their physician or some other third party. So until people are willing to make behavioral changes in their lives and have it be part of their lifestyle, I don't think it's going to have a big impact on health. It might have a huge impact on cost.
I want to raise another issue from the patient point of view, which I've talked about in this forum before, and that's who owns the data, right? And so I'm getting perhaps some sort of a digital health intervention through my employer. Then I change jobs. Where do I get the data from? Maybe if I get 5 VR and it's going in through my health system, it's subject to some of the rules from CMS. Not sure about open medical records, but you change jobs. And I think one of the changes that I think has been underestimated is the way we're breaking up the healthcare system into pieces, the way that the technology did with other industries, right? Venmo is your financial transactions and other different pieces. And we're breaking up healthcare because we're taking away the monopoly on professional knowledge, on scientific knowledge from the physician, and we're democratizing it, except we're not really democratizing it, which is what Google likes to say, because it's not really going to the people, it's going to the customer. And the customer is typically not, for a lot of reasons, the individual. It's the employer, it's the insurer, it's the malpractice, for whatever, it's the health system. And so how do I start to own these pieces of information about myself, put them together so that when I move from, San Francisco to Florida to Maine to Las Vegas, where I take care of all the money I got from my IPO, how do I have all my medical information that I can control? And that's one of the things that the public policy people have not even begun to deal with. I was on a couple of webinars last week with, talking about AI and technology and all the rest of it. And then I was on a webinar sponsored by Health Affairs with Liz Fowler, who is head of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation. And Liz is incredibly well respected and helped the Affordable Care Act pass and all the rest of that. Very smart, but they're dealing with Health 1.0. and maybe 0.1, right? Because Congress is fighting about Medicaid and value-based purchasing demonstration programs, and the idea that the kind of transformational technology that people can see when you talk about a driverless car, because that's in the headlines, but people can't put together the kind of things that people in this call and others are doing in healthcare that's kind of visible to us, but not visible to the policy community. They don't really have a clue yet how to deal with it. And I think the patients are going to be the losers in this until the policy community does.
Well, and Michael, to build on that, you've also got all these one-off apps that are focusing on a particular kind of condition, and they're creating their own data set. And nobody's combining all these different data sets into a picture of that particular person.
And that's exactly it, is that if I had it, I have more than one illness, therefore, can I combine them? No. I mean, I've gone to I would go to one health system in Chicago, and I had to go see a doctor in another, and they told me, no, you can't transfer your stuff. You can't do any of that. I had to tell them that, yes, you both have Epic and there is a way of doing it, but they don't know, they don't care. And that's just the easy thing, right? What you're talking about, even harder. I'm sorry.
Just one.
Ian, come in, and then we have to go to Jess because she has.
Yeah, one wee comment is that I think you've been too cynical here. I mean, I think certainly the caregivers I have, I'm sure that the 4 terabytes of virtual reality information, they'll just fax it to the Palo Alto clinic like they do right now, so
I like that.
the largest
So Ian,
in the history
you're
of
recommending that
telecommunications.
GSR get into fax machines. That's the new.
That's it.
Of terabytes of data. Perfect. I'm
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
I don't
4
want-
terabyte
Satellite
fax.
behind you.
So
Let's hear from Jess
I want
because
to hear Jess.
she's
because-
talking to all these guys on a daily basis. I mean, are they worried about some of these legal and malpractice and other threats? I mean, is this on the
No.
radar screen? Or they're too busy
No,
doing
I don't
their
think
thing?
that, no, they're not worried about malpractice at all, I don't think. And I think a lot of them are, if they're worried about anything from a policy standpoint, it's FDA approval if their model is tied up to that.
Right.
But I don't think they're thinking about that in a really meaningful way. And I don't think their businesses have been built for that at this point yet. I think it's one of those like, let's just throw this out there. We'll work with an incumbent, or we'll work with, a pharma company or a health system or whatever.
Right.
They've got their stuff. We're just providing it. And I think that there's it's kind of a naive way to go about this for the long term. At the same time, I think I don't see any of the incumbents. It doesn't seem like pushing back on that either. So I think that it's just one of those, just wait till somebody gets sued. And then it's like, once somebody gets sued somewhere and there's some precedents that's set out, then I think we're going to see everybody adjust and all of a sudden it's going to dial back. But I think right now there's not enough utilization among patients or health systems or pharma companies. I mean, if you look at Pear's numbers, they're dismal. They don't have any client. Who's using this? There is nobody to sue because there's 6 of them and they're all doing great right now. There isn't, the numbers aren't there yet for anybody to, I mean, you even look at a comparable, not a comparable situation, the opposite here, but it's look at the number of people who got the COVID vaccine and how long it took to get to a point where it's some people are experiencing side effects. It's I just think with this digital stuff, it's the potential for reaching patients is huge, but there's just nobody's using this enough, I think, right now at this point for any meaningful conversation around, what happens when we get sued for this, because there just isn't enough out there to look at right now.
But Jess, I agree with you. I think it's early days, and we'll figure that out. And it took a long time for Epic, which has now been sued once or twice for extent of decision support stuff, but it took a long time for that to happen. But go back to your favorite, and you've got to use your catchphrase. What are people trying to build, right? People are trying to build primary care. Say it. Come on.
Virtual primary care company that does some navigation with a side of mental health. Everything is converging. And so it's the digital therapeutics category to me is such a sub category of much larger stuff happening in health tech, digital health, virtual care, telehealth. It just, you can get really granular with it. And a company like Pear, it's I think of Pear, I think of Click, I think of Silver Cloud. Those are one kind of company that have always been backed by big pharma that's got stars in their eyes and think that they're going to be able to, either sell more drugs that they have by wrapping those things around their pills, or by, oh my God, holy grail would be to completely not have to go through the bullshit that exists to get a molecule through the process and on the street, and instead sub this out with some sort of a digital thing that can be infinitely scalable, but they're charging for. I mean, that's what they're chasing. And it's we're far from that. We're far from a blockbuster DTX. That is not going to happen anytime soon. But I think some of this other stuff, the real, I actually do some consulting with a medical malpractice insurance company. They insure a lot of hospitals in Alabama, so rural. They were freaking out during COVID about what was going to happen with telehealth. They were starting to really think about what their strategy was around MedMail when people were not coming physically into the office anymore and care was being provided over telehealth. It was there was what if scenarios about what happens then, or what happens if you get a shot, you get your vaccine or whatever, and it's in the parking lot of a drugstore as opposed to inside a hospital room. They're worried about stuff like that. And I think that's much more real term in terms of policy and in terms of medical malpractice insurance and things like that, and safeguarding the digital health experience around, first, I think that virtual care where there actually is a doctor involved. And all we've done is just swap out the mechanism for that physician to connect with the patient and made it digital. I think that needs to be addressed first. I think that's where people are looking.
Hey, Jess, you have to answer the question that Kim raised at the beginning. Are any of those mental health companies going to help Britney Spears?
Actually, I think a lot of them.
Have you guys
Could she have avoided her father by using the computer for mental health apps late at night and avoided her father's
She
computer?
might have done that.
Legal issue, and the case precedent that's set for whatever happens with her, I think, is going to really impact like people who are put into conservatorships for reasons for their mental health and concern going down the road. So I think, as funny as it is to joke about that, I mean, that is a legitimate issue, and that poor woman is definitely experiencing trauma as a result of this. So I hope she can find Talkspace on her phone, because I think that what she's been able to do on Instagram in terms of getting a group of people to rally around her and make this a big issue and actually draw some attention to the fact that she's being abused is fantastic.
Absolutely.
No, actually, if you haven't seen, you haven't seen the Netflix movie "I Care a Lot." I Care a Lot. You should. It's fantastic. It's really fantastic about it. It's a great movie, but it's also about this issue. But I do want to go
only on the gang do you get driverless cars and Britney Spears.
Full stack.
But I do want to go to one thing before we end, which is and I want to come back to Justin on this, which is, so there are a lot of people trying to build Michael was saying that you have your VR data in one place and your mental health data in another place and different apps. There are a lot of people trying to build, as Jess saying, these navigation systems. Now, we've got Accolade, which is public. We've got Transcarent, which is starting to raise money at a big valuation. You've got a whole bunch of Doctors on Demand merging with Grand Rounds, and a bunch of others who talk about this, right? So obviously, Optum, Anthem, Mayo, etc., want to do the same thing. They don't want to let you out of their network, and they're all thinking about this. So if you believe that you could have an organization that could fix that, I guess what that sort of integration or the data integration or the care, does that mean that we end up with a system where these new companies are going to have to compete in that world and become not just tech companies supplying the incumbents, but also directly become medical groups themselves? So Justin, you must have come. I've been on a call with a VC with somebody trying to sell tech to doctors, and the end of the response was, "We love your thing. Come back when you've hired a bunch of doctors and built a virtual clinic, because selling the tech to doctors is too much like hard work." You see a company like Babylon kind of going down that same path, saying we're going to SPAC out by doing essentially buying medical groups and putting our technology into them, rather than going and selling our tech to medical groups across the world. Where do you think the heads of your colleagues in VC is regarding this? We're going to build a virtual clinic, virtual stack, and do it all ourselves, versus we're going to supply technology to the rest of the world.
Distribution is the key for all of these digital products, and how are you going to do that? And a lot of people, right? And again, looking at Pear, hey, they thought doctors were going to prescribe this. Then, oh shoot, we need some of our own providers to get our things out. But distribution is the key. I mean, also look back in digital health, right? Why was Livongo successful? They had the best distribution. It's not that they had the best product. It's not that they had the best digital intervention. They had the best sales team and channel, right? That basically paved the way for every other digital health company to say, look, we can go through employers. We have incentive alignment. Do we need to really prove the best outcomes? Not necessarily, but there's all these other fringe benefits that you'll get when you use us, and they like us. So distribution is the key. Exactly whether that's going to be, one care navigation platform that builds everything, is it going to be these digital formularies offered by, CVS or Walgreens, or is it going to be someone like Apple Health that ends up owning all your healthcare data, and then, digital therapeutics or whatever version of digital health companies are tied onto that? I'm not sure. I think actually in one of the things, I'm looking at is just really disease-focused verticals where, hey, can you win in something narrow end to end, where you own distribution, you own or touch some of the providers, right, to not get, break the law there, but you're able to own the experience end to end, from recruiting patients, getting all the big physician groups behind you, and actually delivering care. And I think that will happen. And I think there will be many, because, am I convinced that the Teladoc Livongo will be able to do all of chronic care disease? No. I don't think that's going to be the case. And, how big are going to be those chunks? Is it going to be musculoskeletal care? I think it's a fantastic one to really, break off from the system. No one's buying, surgeons yet. They're really expensive and actually very hard to work with. But I do think you're going to start to see disease verticals who are broken out, where people own the end-to-end process. And so it would be great if one person figured out everything and merged everything all at once. But I think actually the specific diseases are more likely.
So if I walk into your office with my brilliant startup, would you rather I was selling a tech product, and this is kind of the American world versus, Teladoc debate, and I, Jess, you had just interviewed yesterday.
I just interviewed Roy. Just interviewed him.
But they're basically on the part of saying we need to be selling, technology to incumbents. Technology is a better sale. You got a bunch of others. I mean, pick, one that I know is just going in. You mentioned it. What's a teeny vertical, but in IBD, a company called Oshi, right, which is now going to go becoming a virtual clinic for all to do with all to do with your gut health, IBD, IBS, Crohn's, all that stuff. We've got everything for you in a box, and we're going to sell that, and it's going to take you out of the system. Where do you have a preference by coming with one versus the other?
I think I have a preference for the Oshi model of we're going to capture this end to end. I think today, to me, that's more exciting, and we're seeing that right in mental health, right? Mental health, so many people have been talking about for years, but if you really look today at what's happened, teletherapy and this idea that, hey, people not only want therapy done virtually, but then actually this is a better experience than what we had before. And I think, right, a lot of mental health is going to completely move in this kind of vertical way. That's for better and for worse, not as attached necessarily to the traditional healthcare system before. Not that it was very closely attached, in the 1.0 world. So I do prefer that. Again, are there going to be data and infrastructure companies, right? The Zeus, the new EHR that's going to provide everyone. Is there going to be things like that are successful too? Probably. I hope so. But I think really verticals in the long run are going to win.
I mean, both things can be true, though, right? I mean, you could have an American Well building platforms that are plug compatible with the phrase I wrote down when you were talking, Justin, is digital service lines. I mean, the service line mentality is embedded in the conventional system. And it's quite conceivable that you see the emergence of digital service lines. I've been saying that it's not going to be pure substitution. It's going to be end-to-end redesign of clinical processes that are more digital in their mix, right? It's hard for me to imagine somebody who's on Medicare and has health issues that you, meaning being human, not everything's digital. I learned this when we worked with Pitney Bowes years ago. There's no such thing as a digital consumer. Eventually, you have to touch stuff. It's just a question of how much. So I could see digital service lines that are richly digital compared to current service lines, right? That to me is very plausible, but it doesn't mean that American Well and Jess's great interview, which I applaud and recommend to you all, that they can't flourish as well as being a platform provider.
Thank you. For
it's just that not everybody's going to win, right? Because there's so many of these bloody things. There's got to be a big sorting out.
Yeah, thank God there's like $4 trillion of healthcare cost every year that we could just erode at,
Well, that was my conclusion on a call this morning I had with my Levitt Partners colleagues. I made the forecast. We're going to 27% of GNP on health by 2027. It's like, this Alzheimer's, it's crazy. It's crazy. The thing is out of control. It is a revenue maximizing industry. And all we've done is unleashed great minds like Justin onto this, how to have another sort of set stream of revenue. I don't know. I need to drop the mic and leave. I'm getting too old.
No, we need you. All these old problems are coming back again.
Michael, you were trying to get in there.
By the way, Ian, all you have to remember is when it comes to my health, money is no object.
Yeah.
I'll come back. I wrote something a few years ago about collaborative health. And what we're going to end up with is that patients are going to ask, and doctors are going to do it for their own survival, that everywhere that you have data, all your different streams of providers and yourself and whatever alternative online only companies know about, that when you ask someone to engage, okay, so they share information, they share engagement, and the really tough thing that nobody talks about, and this comes back to what Jess and Ian both talked about with the malpractice, is accountability, shared accountability, right? So if we're giving power to patients and power to new entities and power to all these folks here, who is accountable for what? And right now, all we know is that if you're a company, everything's going to go right and you don't have to worry about it. If you're a politician, none of the voters are ever going to be accountable for anything bad ever happening to them. And if you're a provider, it's not my fault. So part of the issue is who's going to be accountable, how are we going to share information. And I think Justin, you're right about the end-to-end for particular service lines, but I think we're going to end up with crossover also, because as you know, people have more than one condition, right? And the incumbents would very much like to make it easy, right? I'm a drug company that has a drug in this, I have a lot of money. And you know what? The first time we get a congressman who has a pacemaker and his kid has depression and he also has diabetes and he's the chairman of a Senate subcommittee, that's when we're going to start to see a little bit of change, right? And so as this becomes mainstream and people who have political power and legal power start to be affected, that's going to mix things up. Just real quickly, Matthew said that I haven't been involved with patient safety. I've been waiting for years for a very important congressman to be the victim of a patient safety incident. Not enough to die, just serious enough to recover and hold hearings. So I'm still waiting.
Depends on the congressman.
So you're right. You're absolutely right.
All right. Well, we're coming to the end of our hour, so I will end this the way we always end this, where I go around the room and I go around the virtual room, ask people what they're looking at and what they're expecting to see and what their forecast is for the next few days and weeks and months. So I will start with you, Kim.
Well, instead of answering that, because of Justin's unique expertise, I want to propose a modern day version of the trolley dilemma. So the AI can either drive Matthew to Lake Tahoe safely, or it can diagnose the sepsis, but it can't do both. So what does it choose?
I know which one I'll choose, because sepsis already happens, and I have to go to Lake Tahoe quite a lot. Probably should put that to the popular.
Your history of poor transportation decisions just continues.
All right, for that, Jessica, you're next.
Matthew continues to make poor transportation decisions. So what do I got my eye on? I think I'm going to just throw this out there. I think some crazy, okay, I felt like the pair SPAC was just I mean, that happened, that news came out and I pinged Matthew and I was like, I feel like this is the top. Don't you think we've hit the top when this is SPACing out? But I feel like there's one more in there, one more really weird health tech company is going to just go for it. And I think we're going to hear that in the next couple of weeks.
Ian.
Well, I think my prediction is next week we'll reach herd immunity for Democrats. It will be officially announced. But my take home actually is twofold. One is get Justin in front of more policymakers and decision makers. I think we need to get him exposed to all of these folk we're working with. And the other thing is, I'd love you guys to do who's going to merge with whom over the next 12 months, a roll up of all these things. I think the roll up game would be a fantastic gang.
Great.
All right. We'll
I love matchmaking. That's my fave.
Just does that.
No, remember, Matthew? I told you, I feel like we subliminally planted the seed for Teladoc Livongo. Both sponsors of my show, their logos were together, the colors kind of blended. All of a sudden, they decide to merge. That's not a coincidence.
Jess, I think you could run this gigantic Lego game of all you, and you could put them all together.
It would be
brilliant.
It could be like the final bracket for the Euros or the Final Four or whatever.
You need to monetize it, though. Come on.
That virtual primary
Healthcare
care side of mental health and care navigation. I'm going to start mixing all sorts of crazy stuff, like fertility benefits plus ADHD plus, totally. I'm going to get all over this.
I've been asking all the people who launched the Health 2.0, including Doximity was there and GoodRx and Livongo and everyone else. They still owe me 10%. I keep on saying this. I never got the check anyway. So Justin, what are you looking at in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, Ian, happy to speak with anyone. So let me know when. But Jessica, I'll say there's going to be more. I think there's going to be more health tech IPOs. People are saying, is this a peak? Is this a bubble? There's so far to go, right? All these digital interventions are still in such the early days. As long as the economy doesn't collapse, in the next few months, we're going to see many more digital health IPOs.
Many more, but I'm talking like an out of left field one, because I'm sorry, did you see Pear coming? Did you see that coming?
They already, SoftBank invested. how is a SoftBank investment company post not ready to be SPAC'd?
we won't be going round again. All right. Okay. Last word of the week, Michael.
I think we're going to have a lot more of the health tech as well, but I'm looking to see at what point the real world of Health 2.0 connects with the real world of inside the Beltway. And right now, all the way they connect is the people inside the Beltway go and take really high-paying jobs with Google or others. And at some point, they're going to come back to their colleagues and go, there's a different reality out there. So we shall see. Perhaps that comes when the next health IT company signs up Donald Trump to their board. Maybe that's the thing that will bring them together. Or Jared, one or the other.
Hydroxy.com.
So Donald Trump on the board of a digital health company coming up. You heard it first. Yeah.
That's the peak. That tells you you've reached the peak.
That's where the peak is. All right. With that, we're wrapping up this edition of THCB Gang. It's been a lot of fun. There was some serious stuff in there, as well as a lot of joking about AI and the future of where all this stuff is going. Want to thank my regulars, Kim Bellard from Cincinnati, Ian Morrison from Menlo Park, Jessica DaMassa from the presumably now quite hot state of Florida, and Michael Millenson from Chicago, where it's probably still winter up there, or is it funny? I don't know if it's ticked up yet, Michael. And then our guest today was Justin Norden, who's the partner at GSR Ventures. This is Matthew Holt saying thanks to all of you for watching or listening. If you're listening on the podcast later, we will see you back here same time, same place next week on, I think it's June the 31st, or is that July the 1st? I can remember which one. But by that stage, we'll be deep into the Euros, and I'll be figuring out whether England has beaten Germany, which is happening between now and then. And that's nearly as big a game as England-Scotland. So look forward to talking to you all next week. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.